This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/macvoices. And by TunnelBear, the really simple app to privately browse and get around block websites. To find out more and download your own TunnelBear, visit tunnelbear.com/macvoices. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is a talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm excited to have the MacJury back together to discuss the future of the iPad. This is going to be one of those shows we do where we try to figure out what we want in the next iPad and what we need in the next iPad. And we've got a stellar cast for you to share their wisdom and their opinions and hopefully make you think. Even if we're not right, at least we'll make you think. Moving from left to right on my screen, so we're in no particular order. Back with us is Father Gabriel. Father, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Nice to see you also. Great to be back.
It's great to be back, and before you were here, you were Brother Gabriel, so congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, back in May I was ordained a priest, so yeah, it's been a great time.
Yes.
So you got a promotion.
Pretty much. I am now a level 2 cleric.
Sweet. I bet you have some awesome dice rolls.
They are. Smite Evil has really worked out well.
Nice.
And you also have changed your physical location as well.
Yeah, I'm no longer in the Bay Area. I'm now up in Portlandia, where everything is delightfully weird.
Okay. Should we just leave it at that, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Great food. Gosh, it's so awesome.
All right.
But anyway, no, it's great times.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure to have you back.
So, Father Gabriel, I have to ask, when you go out for chicken, do you ask where it was raised? And then do you want to go to the farm?
I was actually thinking of starting my own cult so that I could raise chickens and then other people could ask at my restaurant.
Now, you see, that's brilliant. That's capitalism in action right there. I fully
Absolutely.
support this.
I love it that you support capitalism. That's fantastic. And the gentleman who is conducting the interview of Father Gabriel is Mr. Jeff Gamet. Jeff, it's been way too long since you've been here. It's great to have you back.
Now that the court order's been lifted and I can come back, it's great.
So, as if I need to ask, but for the sake of the viewers and listeners, what do you do?
I write a lot and I talk a lot, mostly over at macobserver.com and then sometimes at Fresh Brewed Tales, where I talk about the stuff that I see people do in coffee shops, and then a ton of podcasts. Off the top of my head, what do we have? Daily Observations, that's a new one I'm doing. And Apple Context Machine, the iOS show, the Big Show. I'm easy to find.
Well, it's good to have you here. I'm glad you found your way back to us. No
it's good to be back.
Yes. Last but absolutely not least, I haven't seen him since, I guess, NAB in Las Vegas, Mr.
Yep.
Rob Walch. Rob, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Yeah. So what are your current claim to fames?
So my day job is Libsyn, where I'm VP of Podcaster Relations, which means I get to work with podcasters for my day job. And then my night job into the very early morning hour job is Today in iOS podcast, which I spend my time researching stuff about iOS. Not to be confused with iOS Today, which I've already given Leo a lot of grief about changing his name of his show to be so close to mine. But the good news is if you Google or you go into iTunes and search for iOS Today, my show comes up before his.
Good for you.
Yes.
Nice.
Have you gotten anywhere with requesting the change?
No, I just gave him grief going, okay. Your interns forgot to do a little searching when they did this change, Leo, thanks. And I go, but the good news is, and I sent him the screenshot, I go, mine shows up before yours when you do the search for iOS Today.
Nice. Very good.
He just apologized. He goes, sorry.
And I like the way you couch it as you have a day job and then an evening job and into the early morning job. That's the way it sometimes feels, doesn't it?
Oh, it doesn't feel that way. It's that way.
It is that way, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what when the kids go to sleep, that's when I start on Today in iOS.
Well, I've thought this would be a great panel to get together and discuss the future of the iPad. We have reason to believe that there are new versions of the iPad coming out. Naturally, we don't know. Nobody but Apple knows. But whether it's in a month or so or whether it's 6 months or a year, we're going to have new models of an iPad. And I'm curious to see what each of you, from your own perspectives, think you would like in an iPad, what would make a difference to you and cause you to jump into the much discussed upgrade cycle that we're still waiting to figure out for the iPad, and also what you think the iPad needs for the general public to maybe kickstart that same upgrade cycle and convince people to go beyond the device they're using. Again, how about if we just start with you, Father, since you're on the left of my screen. Do you have an iPad? Which one, and what do you think would make you maybe do the upgrade?
Yeah, my friend Ed just gave me a iPad Air, so I'm still kind of getting used to that. I haven't ventured into the iPad Air 2 yet, but I tell you what, now that I have an iPhone 6 Plus, I'm definitely missing Touch ID on the iPad, and I'm sure that the new one is going to have that. That's stock nowadays, but it would be nice to incorporate other features. The same friend and some other friends purchased an Apple Watch for me recently, and Force Touch is impressive. Mm-hmm. And so I'd actually hope to see any future devices with a touchscreen have Force Touch, so that you can be more versatile with and even to have some level of programmability by the developers, so that they could use it as they more or less desire, instead of Apple controlling that too heavily. Also, I've been reading that the A9 chip will be coming out, and that will be quite nice, I think, and necessary if they go for a larger form factor. But I'm not sure, personally, I'm not sure if that's something that I value. I don't know about you guys, but everyone keeps talking about this iPad Pro idea, and I'm not too sure if that's a good idea. I don't know if that's addressing an area of the market that is. I don't know if anyone's calling for that, really. I know I'm not. I'm very happy with the form factor of the iPad Air, and I was happy with the previous iPad as well. That screen size is perfect for me.
Jeff, jump in. Does the next iPad need to have Force Touch? Do you think that'll be a differentiator?
I don't think it needs to have Force Touch, but I think it should have Force Touch, because that's a very tangible feature that the public is going to have a real interest in, because we've got it on the Apple Watch. I think people will want it on the iPhone, and they're going to want it on the iPad. So it's one of those things Apple needs to figure out how to effectively put onto its tablet devices. Now, the thing, though, that would make the next iPad an absolute must-have upgrade for me is something that most people will never even think about or probably even care about. And that would be a much higher sensor grid for touch sensitivity. And this is an issue I deal with all the time, and it's so frustrating where I'm using the higher resolution styluses, where they have the really tiny tips instead of the fat tips. If you make a diagonal line, your diagonal line is wavy, and that's because that sensor grid is too coarse to be able to accurately track that diagonal movement, because the stylus tip is having... There's a computer behind this stylus tip that tricks your iPad into thinking it's actually a bigger surface that's touching. And so when you put all that together, you get wavy lines. I want Apple to really increase the resolution of that sensor grid, so we can have those small point styluses and draw diagonal lines that are really straight. That'll be awesome for me. And if Apple does that, it won't be a matter of if I buy an iPad. It will be a matter of how quickly can I get my credit card out of my wallet. And that will just be huge for me. I'm still on an original iPad Air because I couldn't find a compelling reason for me to upgrade to the iPad Air 2. And unless they do some really impressive stuff, or even just that sensor grid in the next iPad Air, I will be hard-pressed to figure out why I need to upgrade. Well, other than the split screen thing. But other than that, it would be very difficult for me to figure out why I would want to upgrade to an iPad Air 3, we'll call it. As far as the big screen iPad goes that Father Gabriel mentioned, I think we're probably going to see one. And I have a feeling that the markets that will be interested in that will be more focused. So that'll be some enterprise type uses. And I think many artists will be interested in that because they'll have a much larger canvas to work on. And along with that, I have a feeling that if Apple does give us a big screen iPad, so we're talking about 13-ish inches, I think Apple's going to give us a stylus to go along with it. It won't be a required piece of the iPad ecosystem, but it will be an accessory that you can get. And I think it will change the way we look at styluses, much in the way Adobe wanted us to change how we looked at styluses when they released Ink and Slide. Because Ink and Slide are game changers. People just don't get it. So they're not really jumping on the whole Ink and Slide thing. But if Apple does some of the things that we're seeing in some of their patents, where they're putting haptic feedback engines into the stylus, so it can simulate textures as you drag the stylus across your screen, and it can kind of trick you into thinking that you're working on three-dimensional surfaces, I think that could be a pretty compelling thing too.
Jeff, I want to give Rob a chance, but bring me back to the resolution, because that's something I want to examine with you. Rob, one of the most interesting things I think Jeff just said, one of the most radical things, is that we'll see a stylus. Do you think we'll see a stylus?
I had that in my notes here.
Uh-oh.
I actually had it for both the iPad Air 3 and for the iPad, let's call it Pro, the 12.2 or 12.9 inch size. So I was saying, yeah, we're going to see a stylus. And it's per what Jeff was saying, it's going to be for the better resolution, because people are using the iPad to create. And I think that's where Force Touch comes back too. Force Touch is a really nice feature in the fact that the best way to relate it is it's like a right click. It gives you that ability to get one extra option in there and do something. And that, I think, is going to be really important with split screen. And when you're using it more for business-oriented applications, I think that Force Touch really comes into play. Now, personally, something that I want to see in there, improved speakers. For God's sake, give us better speakers finally on the iPads. The screen is great, but I've always felt the speakers have never been up to par. And I use it mostly, at least around my house, they're used mostly for consuming Netflix and other video content, at least by my kids. So I know they would like better speakers.
So, Rob, what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that when you consume content on your iPads, you are using the built-in speakers and you're not plugging in headphones, by and large.
Most of the time, correct. Now, when we have two kids in the same room, then I start throwing headphones at them.
Sure,
but
totally
there's
makes
times
sense.
that me and the wife are consuming on an iPad, we're watching something, and it's just there, we're holding it, and we're using the speakers on it.
All right. And the way I use the speakers on my iPad, they're for audio feedback, like when I'm talking to Siri. For that, I think the speakers are totally fine. But I just thought about them as your primary audio source for, say, movies and music. But then again, that's not how I use my iPad.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing here, that this is a device that so many of us use in so many different ways. I'm sitting here thinking about Rob's suggestion, and my iPad is in a stand right here beside me, and it's in landscape mode because I had some video up before we started the show. So that's the way I have it. So does that mean that the speakers should go to the left and right in landscape mode, or it would be top and bottom in portrait orientation? Or do you prefer them, on one side? Are you going to get an adequate stereo field there? Is that necessary? That presents some interesting design challenges.
I loved when they went to stereo speakers on the last one, because the only way to really get that stereo feel is to put it right up to the bridge of your nose. I mean, outside of that, why bother having stereo speakers on it? So I would love to see it. We're not going to see it, but I would love to see it with speakers in the front, 4 speakers in the front, and then depending on the orientation, they switch around on where the left and right is. Not going to see it. Would love to see it. Apple will never do it.
That's
Just
a great
look.
Yeah, I was just going to add that would be a great design challenge for Johnny Ive to figure out what to do with those speakers. Because I'm sure the reason why it's at the very bottom, a place where they can't be seen, is they're probably something that, it's a hidden member. He doesn't want to deal with it or look at it. But
it's a blemish.
It's a blemish, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But front-facing speakers, to do that in an elegant way I think that would be impressive. That's a challenge. That's a real challenge. Not chairs at the spaceship campus.
Yeah.
I think not the last Macworld, but the Macworld before that. I think I'm afraid I'm going to have to go back in the archives and look, but I think someone had basically a case that gave you some high quality stereo speakers for portrait or for landscape mode. Excuse me. And I'm afraid to call a name because I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. So I'll just say I think there is a solution out there, and it was surprising if you had, not to the bridge of your nose, but if you held it. I mean, it's not going to rival your 50-inch TV, but it was a definite stereo separation that added to the experience. It also added to the weight.
Yeah, I've got a case like that where it opens up and there's speakers on the left and right.
Oh. This one didn't open; they were just there. But this one they fold open?
Yeah, hold on, I'll grab it.
Okay.
Well, the kids have those speakers, but basically it's a case, and the front of the case it closes, goes like this, and they open up, and there's speakers on each side. So I'm not going to get it back from the kids because they're way too loud if I try to bring them in the house.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go and look for that. That's an interesting design. That's not one I've seen. This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. If you're a Mac Voices listener or viewer, it's a pretty safe bet that we share some characteristics. You like to learn, to keep up with what's new and interesting in the tech field and beyond. That you are tech savvy to one degree or another. That you want to be more productive and probably need to be more productive, either for yourself or for your vocation. We all have our secret weapons that keep us afloat and ahead of the competition. I'm happy to say that lynda.com is a key piece of my arsenal. No one can learn everything about everything, no matter how hard we try, because tomorrow, next week, or next month, there's even more of everything. If I can learn something from an expert, why would I want to waste precious time trying to figure it out for myself? lynda.com has experts in a wide variety of subjects, tech and non-tech, who will help you learn what you need to learn fast and efficiently, and at your own pace. Say that you need to get up to speed on Google Apps for the office, or want to learn how to work with Camera Raw in Photoshop Creative Cloud, or are interested in learning about entrepreneurship from someone like the one and only Guy Kawasaki. Those are just a few of the recent courses that lynda.com has published. And I mean just a few, because there are all sorts of videos to help you learn about the general concepts of a topic, or the down and dirty details. You can try all of this for a free full 10 days by signing up at lynda.com/MacVoices. During that 10 days, you can watch whatever you want, as much as you want, on any subject you want. No restrictions, no limitations. Try a design course, then a spreadsheet course, then a web publishing course. You pick the topics that suit you, not some limited subset of the collection of over 3,500 courses on lynda.com. Please, do something nice for yourself right now by signing up for 10 days free at lynda.com/MacVoices. Then let me know what you decided to watch. Maybe we can trade recommendations. I'm on Twitter as @ChuckJoyner, and I want to hear from you. One last time, lynda.com/MacVoices for a free 10-day trial. Do it now, you won't regret it. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of Mac Voices. It's interesting, though, that I guess there's that much interest in having the audio, because, Jeff, you said you use earphones primarily.
Yes. And, well, unless I'm playing video games, which actually isn't that often. Okay, so primarily if I'm listening to audio on my iPad, I'll have headphones plugged in. It's just when Siri talks, that's That's the primary use for the built-in speakers.
Father, how do you consume audio with your iPad? Is that, I should ask, I guess, what do you use your iPad for? Is it a creation device or a consumption device?
Well, I'm kind of discovering a new use for it now. Previously, I was a student, so as a student, I used it for everything, note-taking. I think that's what we talked about last time, in fact, was my use of the iPad, and that I had forced myself into becoming an iPad-only sort of person. And my laptop just sits on my desk now. But now, in this environment, assisting in running a parish, I even have less use for the iPad at this point, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how and in what ways it will help the work that I'm doing now. So still, I would say I use it for taking notes if I'm in meetings. I still find that the iPad is the best sort of technology device for meetings. Phones are the worst. They're the death of meetings. And meetings are bad enough as it is. But the iPad, and of course laptops, you put the screen up and you disconnect with people when you do that. And you can be tempted to be on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, doing something else while you should actually be engaged in the meeting. And the iPad always helps with that. And perhaps that's the reason why I don't personally find the value so much for a 12.9 or whatever size iPad Pro. And that's also why I don't find a huge value for the iPad mini personally, because my use case is very much in the note-taking, the sort of student, liberal artsy sort of work. I draw, I doodle when I'm bored. I'll do that as well. I watch videos. But again, it's strange. Now that I have an iPhone and it's a 6 Plus, last night I just watched The Big Lebowski on the 6 Plus and it was beautiful. Like that's I actually preferred that for some reason than the iPad. I don't know.
Father Gabriel, just so you know, The Big Lebowski on any size screen is just beautiful.
That's true. This is true. It should be consumed at least once a month.
I agree completely.
So this takes me back to something that I wanted to come back to Jeff with. I know a caricature artist that I'm hoping to have on the show so she can talk about it. I met her last year, and she was using an iPad for her work at a live event. This year, she's working the same event, but this year she's gone to a Cintiq, I believe, tablet, a large one, but not and using then obviously a Windows machine, and it was not because of the size. The size was a big benefit to her, but one of the biggest things that she said she liked, as I recall, was the fact that she had more resolution in the software that she was using. The working space was nice, but it was the resolution that she could create, and therefore things that she created, people could print out at larger sizes. Mm-hmm. And I don't know enough about that, Jeff. And you brought up the sensor grid, which I thought was really interesting. Is it the sensor grid that is creating that limitation, or is it just the software itself?
Well, there's two places where you look at resolution on a tablet. And the first place is the place most people think about it, and that's the screen itself, what you're seeing. So you have your screen resolution, and that resolution is what's determining ultimately how big your final output image is going to be, unless it's a vector thing, and then it can just be however big you want. But for something that's going to be raster, then that screen resolution matters, because the applications that we're using on our tablets are dependent on the screen resolution. As an example, if I use Paper by 53 on my iPad mini, my first gen iPad mini, I will get a much lower resolution image out of that than if I draw something on my iPad Air. So when I draw, I always do it on my iPad Air because I want the higher resolution. And when you look at some other tablets that can offer you even higher resolutions, sure, I get why people would want to use those. And I think that's going to be one of the things that if Apple does the iPad Pro, it's going to be a selling feature, is that you can create much higher resolution graphics on that tablet.
Rob, iPad Pro? Yes, no?
I believe there's one coming. I think the partnership with IBM, I think, just dictates that it's going to happen. I hope it happens this year in the fall. Pretty confident. Actually, I'm 100% confident that the iPad Air 3 will be, because Digitime said it's not going to happen this year. And as we all know, anything Digitime says is always 100% wrong. So if Digitime says no iPad Air 3 until next year, we're guaranteed that there's one this year.
That's confidence.
Yeah. I mean, have they ever been right on anything? I used to joke.
Actually, in the last couple of years, they have had a really good track record, believe it or not. I know the look on your face is exactly the way I have felt. Yeah. And when it was pointed out to me, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not buying this. Yeah. And went back and started looking at a lot of what they've been
was
posting.
It something where they guessed both ways? Because they do that too. They'll say no and yes, and then they can point back to, oh, look, this article we said yes when it's yes, and no when it's no.
And there's a lot of yes stuff where they've gotten right, where it's just yes. And surprisingly more often than you would expect. So my rule of thumb with Digitimes now is not that they or what they say is gospel, but instead that what they say deserves a second look and more research, because more often than not, there is probably a kernel of truth in whatever it is they're reporting. Part of the problem they're having right now, I think, is that they get the right information and interpret it incorrectly. So don't discount Digitimes.
Yeah, see, I always thought Digitimes was made up by somebody in Cupertino as a way to put misinformation out there, because they were so wrong so often. I was like, how could you be this wrong this often?
You know, like, for the longest time, if you had told me that, I would have believed that over anything Digitimes said.
Do you guys?
But now, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask. Do you guys think that perhaps the upgrade isn't going to be a massive upgrade this year, or I guess it would be a massive upgrade for productivity, is just simply putting in the new processor?
Right. I think the A9X processor is probably is a given. Bluetooth 4.1 is going to be a given because it's in the new 6th gen iPod Touch, and I think Force Touch is kind of a given. Support for the stylus is hopeful, and I'd put that on the higher confidence side. After that, none of us have to this point have mentioned the camera, right? Do we even care about a new camera? Camera specs on the iPad, that's like yawn.
We're nerds, though. I still am amazed at all the events that I go to where, as they say, normal people are constantly taking photography with the iPad, but I don't think they care about resolution so much. It's just convenient.
Right. The one thing I would like to see that they didn't have last year was true Apple Pay support, and not so much for using it to pay with, but to be paid. So if they had true NFC support, where a lot of you, how many times have you seen an iPad as a kiosk?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I think Apple really needs to, on the iPad Air 3rd, put full NFC support so it supports Apple Pay, so that you can use it as a terminal to go tap your Apple Watch against and pay someone.
It's funny that you say that.
Awesome.
It would be. Here in Portland, I've actually seen more of those kiosks with an iPad than when I was living in the Bay Area. So it's growing, and it's up here anyway. There's quite a few people at their businesses where they have iPads as that. That would be a great thing. I would love to have that convenience.
Yeah. I think that's the only thing that really will drive some major uptake in it, because of businesses using that.
Rob, I might disagree with you a little bit on the camera, because I think that people that are interested in doing video are looking for the best camera they can get. Not as much still photography, but more the video part, because the iPad Air 2 is much easier to edit video on than, say, an iPhone. So, you can do it on the iPhone, but it's just you have that bigger screen, so therefore it's nicer. And so I don't know if that's a large enough group of the iPad customer base.
Again, back to what would it make for me to upgrade? To me, since I've got the 6 Plus, camera resolution, whatever they do on it's not going to matter to me. I mean, they're not going to get, you won't even see it be as good as a 6 Plus camera. Might be probably the same as what the 6 camera is right now. That'd be about as good as it would get, which is still very good. But I don't know, at least for me, the camera doesn't mean much. It's nice that it's there, and I understand some people, and I've seen people at the shows, the trade shows, walking around with the full setup and gear around the iPad, and that's their full primary device for recording. So, yeah, for those few people, yeah.
Jeff, do we need to have parity between the iPhone cameras and the iPad cameras? Or do you think that there's a point that it makes sense just not to bother to go beyond? And I realize that may be contradictory with what I just said about video, but do we hit a point that that's good enough?
It's always a matter of perspective and how people want to use the devices. But my feeling is that we should have parity, not just so that we know we're getting the same resolution across all our devices for video and photos, but from an economic standpoint, if Apple can buy the same camera and put it in all their devices, they're going to be able to get a better price, which brings the cost down, and hopefully that means that they save a buck or two for us in the process. And if we don't get it on that end, well, if you're an investor, you'll get it on the other end because the profit will be a little bit higher.
I would have loved to have seen that on the iPod Touch. I was a huge iPod Touch user up until recently, so I'm literally going from an iPod Touch to an iPhone 6 Plus, and
that's a huge jump.
Talk about a jump! It was
Yeah.
amazing jump. I still am not accustomed to having a camera that is usable. And so it still hasn't worked itself into my routine, and I'm learning. But to have that sort of a camera in every device, that would be impressive. That would be awesome.
The camera that's in the iPod Touch 6 Gen is right now most similar to what's in the iPad Air 2.
Oh, wow.
Okay. When you look at the different devices.
I hesitate to ask this question because I think, given what you've said, it may not apply to you, but I'll ask for opinions anyway. Where does the Mini versus the iPad Air 3, let's call it, fit? Because if we introduce a Pro, now we have 3 different sizes. We have at least 2 different sizes of phones. At some point, does something get squeezed out?
I think the Mini gets squeezed out, personally. I know that there's rumors that there's one coming, but I honestly don't see its purpose when you have the 6 Plus around.
Jeff?
See, I'm torn on the Mini, and that's because I have a Mini and an iPad Air, and I use them both a lot, but they have different uses. My Mini is a content consumption device, and my Air is to a degree content consumption, but more of a content creation device. And if we add in the iPad Pro, I can see where that's even more of a content creation device. But I'm not sure if that, coupled with the iPhone 6 Plus, is enough to kill off or to justify killing off the iPad Mini.
Yeah, I mean, my wife, her repertoire is the 5S, the iPad Mini Retina, and then the new MacBook. Those are her 3 devices, and she uses them for different reasons. She won't go to the larger iPhone. She doesn't like the size. I mean, my oldest son was ecstatic when my wife looked at the 6 Plus and said, "That thing's too big. I don't ever want it." Because he was like, "Oh, good, I get it." So my wife, 5S, that's it. The 4-inch size, that's as big as she wants to get on her phone. Then she has the iPad Mini Retina for other consumption, doing email, more web surfing. And then when she has to get into some more serious spreadsheets and things like that, then she goes to the MacBook.
Jeff, why? I'm really intrigued. I understand why your Air is, or your Air 2 is your creation device, but why do you see the Mini as the consumption device?
For me, the Mini is better as a consumption device. Well, in part because the on-screen keyboard is the wrong size for me. It just flat out doesn't work for my hands. So for me, reading email on the Mini is okay. Responding to email, I won't do it. I'll actually go to my iPhone to respond to email before I'll do it on my Mini. And I don't even really like responding to tweets on my iPad Mini, and that's only 140 characters. It's the screen size for me is like perfect for reading and just perusing content, but not for really interacting with people and not for creating new stuff. If I'm going to be working on a tablet and I know I'm going to be doing some typing, I just reach for the iPad Air and that's that.
So if I came to your house today and said, Jeff, here, I'm taking your Mini and I'm going to give you a full-size iPad Air to replace it, would you still use them at the same time for different things? Or would you, I mean, is it the two screen that is the benefit? I heard everything you said about the size, but is there enough functionality, pardon me, in having that second screen as maybe something that you sit over here and then you're working with the iPad in your lap?
There have been many times where having two iPads, the Mini and the Air together, has been really handy for me. But I don't think that I am normal, and I say the same thing about you guys, but I mean it in a good way. We're not normal because we really embrace our technology, and we find ways to push those envelopes and use the equipment we have in new and interesting ways. So for me, having two iPads to work with is something that's really cool, especially considering what I do for a living, because I can be researching on one screen while I'm writing on another, and I can use sharing-based apps, that work through iCloud or Dropbox or whatever, so that I can put notes on one device and they automatically show up on another, and I just keep working with them. I love having that option. I think if I was a muggle, just a normal technology user, I would not have any need for two iPads, and I would probably settle on the full-size iPad because I can do more with that one device than I could comfortably with an iPad Mini.
And I think that's also kind of where my position sort of is, and to some degree, it's not so much being a muggle, it's being restricted in the amount of funds I could spend towards technology. And so I have to figure out how best to use or to maximize what I have. So perhaps that's the reason why I don't see a strong position, at least in my setup, for an iPad Mini. So that sort of makes sense to me. But your use case, I think that's awesome. I mean, if I could, I'd have all the things, and I would figure out different ways to use them, and I would, just have the iPad Mini there for reading books or something. And I don't know, it would be fun to be able to have all those devices and figure out new ways to juggle them into a comprehensive workflow.
Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by TunnelBear, the really simple app to browse privately and get around blocked websites. Find out more and download your very own TunnelBear at tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. We're living in a world where Wi-Fi is everywhere to keep us connected everywhere. The only problem with that is that we're not always sure who we're connected to, or who might be watching what we're looking at or talking about. I don't want to sound paranoid, but there are real dangers out there, especially when you're traveling or away from home and need to surf from the hotel room or the coffee shop or even the airport. That's where TunnelBear comes in. TunnelBear is an easy-to-use VPN, or virtual private network, that secures and encrypts your internet connection on your Mac, iPhone, or iPad, so that ISPs, governments, and companies can't monitor what you're seeing, saying, or doing. You can appear to be surfing from a different country if you wish, so that censorship restrictions or blocked websites become accessible, or from your home country if that isn't your issue. Try the free tier of TunnelBear right now by visiting tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. While you're there, be sure to check out their plain English privacy policy. Not a lot of legalese that makes you wonder what they really mean. Unlike some services we could name, TunnelBear's privacy policy is as easy to understand as their service is to use. TunnelBear gives you all the privacy and security of a VPN without any of the setup and maintenance hassles. One-click security, and I do mean one-click security, is waiting for you now at tunnelbear.com/MacVoices. Go get it and surf securely. Thanks to TunnelBear for their support of MacVoices. I have to say, I've had a Mini. I parted with the Mini because I preferred the Air for pretty much everything except arguably the portability, and the difference between the two was not such that it really made a lot of sense for me to keep the money invested in the Mini. If it were sitting here, I'm sure I would find a way to use it. But somebody asked me recently if my iPhone 6 Plus took the place of a Mini. And it doesn't take the place of it, but it gets pretty close. And it fits maybe a little uncomfortably, but it fits in a pocket. Rob, where do you stand on the Mini? Does the Mini have a place in your life?
For my wife, it does. Again, because for her, she doesn't want the larger phone. So, I mean, if you're someone that doesn't want the 4.7 or the 5.5 inch phone, you want to stick with the 4-inch phone, the Mini is a much more attractive device for you, especially for a woman that wants to fit it in a purse and take the Mini with her when she has to go. It being a little bit smaller than the iPad Air size, we've got all of them. The other, the larger size iPad, the full-size iPad, fills up a whole purse, whereas she can take a smaller purse with the iPad Mini. So again, for my wife, who's not the biggest techno person, I mean, she's the type of person that complains when people follow her on Pinterest. Like, why are people following me? I'm just pinning these photos. To her, the right size again is the 4-inch iPhone and the iPad Mini for most consumption and creation and pinning and web surfing and things like that. And then the iPhone for just some quick checking of emails and texts and making phone calls. So, those are where the two different use cases. And then again, when she goes to the MacBook, that's when she's going to be doing spreadsheets and when she's got to do a lot of typing. Whenever she's doing a lot of typing, then it goes to real keyboard. And those are her three use cases. For me, the Mini's too small. I personally don't like the size of the Mini for myself. I like the fuller size iPad. Actually, I want the iPad Pro. I'm hoping that there's a 12.9. That's what would get me to buy a new iPad. I won't buy the iPad Air 3, but an iPad Pro 12.9 inch, that would get me to pull out the credit card.
Would it get you to pull out the credit card because of artistic work or just more workspace for productivity apps?
Being able to have two different apps running at the same time and doing a little bit more with it and traveling in business and being able to use that on the computer in place of my laptop for many cases, that to me would be nice. Now, I'm not going to replace my laptop for podcast editing and things like that for the heavy stuff, but I think for a lot of other things, spreadsheets, I might now be able to do that on the iPad Pro, where I think it's be tougher to do that with the 9.7, whereas a 12.9, it would be a little bit easier to go to split screen, two apps, and get some work done, real work done.
That's something we haven't talked about, is the improvements in the software, notably the side-by-side and some of the other things we saw coming with iOS 9. Is that, I mean, that certainly, I'm with Rob. I think that's going to drive an iPad Pro at some point. It just makes sense. I'm trying to see a split screen on a Mini. I can definitely see a floating video window on a Mini. I'm not sure that the split screen on a Mini is going to make that much difference.
Split screen on a Mini is something I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around because the screen just seems too small to me. But there have been markers that have shown up in iOS 9 betas that indicate that a Mini model will be able to support the split screen mode. So that tells me whatever the next iPad Mini is will probably be capable of supporting that feature. Whether or not Apple enables it, well, we'll have to wait and see. But Yeah, I'm with you. I'm having a hard time seeing why that would be a smart move on a screen that small.
I don't know about a smart move, Jeff. I guess, anytime you can add a capability, it's bound. I mean, I can see somebody that's social media crazy. This would be perfect. It's a small device. Put Facebook on one side, Twitter on the other, and then your life just gets sucked right into the mini, and you're never to be heard from again.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe a kid at a school.
That's a good one.
That's true. Their fingers are a lot smaller than mine.
Mm-hmm. And their eyes actually can see those things. Not like
there's
us.
that too.
They don't have to trombone. They're not sitting there going, whoa.
Yeah. Well,
like getting old eyes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it would be, at least in theory, a bit more affordable than a full-sized iPad. So,
yep, there's that too.
That may be an education play.
Yeah.
The teachers won't be able to read it, but other than that.
One of the rumors out there is this will be the last time they upgrade the iPad mini. This iPad mini 4th will be upgraded with 2 gig of RAM this year, and then we'll never upgrade it again. So we'll see if that rumor holds true. I think it was Ming Qicho, however you pronounce his name. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I don't put much credence in what he says.
Father, you brought up the newer chip. Which I think is always interesting in these devices. Just when you think, boy, this is great, this is fast enough, they bring along another one. And at some point, you do have to wonder what you need. On the other hand, something I would like to see that would definitely cause me to upgrade is some kind of enhancement to Siri. And I don't know if it could ever be iPad Air 3 or iPad Pro specific. But just being able to build in some more hooks into the operating system and therefore into apps that would let me do a little more voice control of apps other than just launching them. If I could launch certain programs and tell them, even if it was a limited subset of things, I would find that extremely useful. And of course, the chip power, I think, is always advantageous when you're trying to do voice recognition.
Well, definitely. And with the Apple Watch, we've seen, I would say, marked improvement in Siri's ability to recognize commands. I don't know if that's specifically something that's going on in the watch or if that's back at the servers in Cupertino or wherever those servers are. I don't know, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The better that Siri can process our language, the better that functionality will affect our lives. And I think Apple is gambling on Siri getting better and better, especially with, as I said, with Apple Watch integration in this entire Apple product ecosystem. And a faster chip would be very helpful for that. There's a lot of other things that chip is going to be good for, especially if they address some questions about improving the pixel quality. They'll need faster processors, both in graphics and also just standard, in order to make things run properly. I don't know.
Well, if they implement Jeff's increased sensor grid, that I would think is going to require more computing power.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about there's so many factors I think that go into deciding on an iPad. Battery life. Is everybody satisfied with their battery life right now for their device?
Yeah. I'm happy with the battery life on my first gen mini and my iPad Air. Even though neither one of them is new anymore, the battery life is still great on both of those.
Battery life is still great on the original iPad first gen that we have here at the house that the kids use. I mean, there has never been an issue I've seen with iPads and battery life. I mean, there have always been much more than what you need to get you through the whole day and then the next day.
Exactly. Benedict Evans, earlier today or last night in a tweet, he mentioned that one of the problems with flat iPad sales has been that they made the iPhone too good. I say, yeah, that's part of it, but they also made the iPad too good. The battery life. I mean, iPad 1, iPad 2, so many people use just the iPad 2. It's amazing. Battery life is great. Processing power is great. In some ways, some of their processing power, I think, is better than my MacBook Pro that I'm using right now. At least it's more efficient.
Yeah, and this is something that drives me crazy because there's some pundits out there who seem to say that because the iPad, that a lot of people have stopped with their current model of iPad and they really don't see the need to upgrade, or at least not yet, that it's kind of a dead end product, and therefore it's a dead product, and Apple should not think about not advancing it any further. And I don't buy that. I mean, I think there's a lot that can be done in software. I think there are a lot of improvements, even if they're incremental at this point. I think we're going to have a hard time seeing a quantum leap anytime soon. But it's far from a dead product, and I think it's such a useful product. I would not want to go back to a world without an iPad if I could avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, they've sold 250 million of the devices. It hasn't actually flopped.
It's not a dead product.
Yeah. It's done well, and I would agree. And I've said it on my show. The original first-gen iPad is still a useful product 5 years later. I mean, so, it will continue to be flat sales, but not because it's a bad device. It's just because so many people have already bought it, and the life cycle on these things are so long. It's not a 2-year cycle. It's a 4 or 5 year turnover on these devices.
Yeah, these pundits, by and large, are not freaking out because people don't replace their MacBook Pro every single year. Mm-hmm. They need to look at iPads in the same light. Right. These are not devices people are going to upgrade every single year. You totally nailed it.
That's a great analogy, Jeff, and I've never heard that one before, and at least that I recall. Because you're right, especially when you're looking at this, content creation or consumption. I mean, how often do you upgrade your television? Yeah, mm-hmm. I know they keep trying to get us to upgrade it every year, but realistically,
the average is 7 years.
Yeah. So is the iPad, is that a reasonable upgrade cycle for an iPad? We haven't hit the 7-year mark, so I don't know.
I think 4 or 5 years. I believe it's a 4 to 5 year life cycle for the typical user. I think some people will go longer. My mom will go longer. But I think the average user will look at the iPad as a 4 to 5 year life cycle.
Which is pretty much what people are doing with their computers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just replaced my 2011 MacBook Pro with the 2015. That was 4 years. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm running a mid-2010 MacBook Pro, and I see no point in replacing it yet.
There you go. Mm-hmm. And the pundits aren't calling for Apple to stop making computers because no one ever buys them.
Yeah, it's just not. I think the consultants and the Wall Street folks just are so enamored with the 2-year life cycle of the iPhone that they think that the iPad is the same way, and it's not. And I don't think it ever was meant to be.
I agree with that, and I'd also add that sometimes they think that they can drive a company by how they report on their products. Mm. So there might be a little bit of that going on as well.
Yeah. Or they're just anxious to be the first ones to make a call, and especially an outrageous call.
Yeah.
It will be very interesting to see what Apple updates for the iPads, and if it's going to be the September update or it's going to be its own event in October. I think that'll tell a lot. If it's in September with the iPhones, I think we're going to see much more modest upgrades going forward.
I was thinking about that this morning, and my thought, I mean, what seems reasonable to me, is you do a silent upgrade at the event, so it just shows up in the store online as an upgraded device, and then you announce something like the Pro or a new Mini at a later event that's dedicated to the iPad.
I don't know. It will be very interesting to see. Are there any other key components to the iPad that we haven't covered, either from your respective positions or just in general? I'm trying to think of the things people tell me about the way they view their iPad and what they're thinking about with upgrading.
The only one I would say is the iPad Pro. One of the rumors is it would have 2 ports, the Lightning port and a USB-C port. And
I have a really hard time believing that.
I know, but it keeps coming back. So we'll see if that one happens. 256 gig, if there's an iPad Pro, you'd probably see that as the top end. Hopefully they kill off the 32 gig on the low end on the iPads. That would be nice if they just said no more 16 gig and we're just going to go to 32 gig for iPads.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Apple's always been weird about storage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, Jeff, from a price perspective, I mean, they want you to have an entry level device. At some point, it doesn't have a lot of storage. It doesn't, you can put some things on it, but it's never intended to be a machine you grow into. It's a machine that fits as soon as you put it on, and there's really nowhere to grow.
But a 32 gig iPad price difference based on what Apple pays for memory would be insignificant.
Right.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Rob, though, what did you say? I'm sorry. You said something that triggered, and then I lost it again.
I just what USB-C?
USB-C. What would you use a USB-C for?
Again, this is one of the rumors that's out there for the iPad Pro, and I guess it comes down to possibly from the fact that you can plug in keyboards or plug in some storage and plug in some monitor to it. There's some things that you would be able to do, maybe make it more dockable from configuration. I'm not sold on that rumor. It keeps coming up. I'll put it in my bingo card that I always put together before the events because it's there. As I always say, I don't believe these rumors, but these are the most common ones. USB-C is nice. It has a lot of functionality, a lot you can do with it. And there's even a company, if you saw the Kickstarter project now, that you can turn your USB-C and Lightning ports now into MagSafe ports. So that's nice. We'll see. We'll see with the iPad Pro. The only reason I could see where it really makes sense to have that again is where it's a dockable configuration in a work environment where you can put it in and you can dock it to an external display and then and have a keyboard there. And that would be, will it support a mouse as well? And, there's a lot of things that are question marks that
I think
in my mind don't make sense.
That.
Yeah.
It's called the MacBook.
Yeah, right. I just don't see it making sense for the iPad, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and I don't think it makes sense for the iPad. Mm-hmm. Apple is not going to make a Microsoft Surface.
Right.
That they gave us the MacBook, and there will be a distinct delineation between their tablet line and their laptop line. And we know what that baseline is because we have the MacBook. So whatever the iPad Pro gives us will be different enough from that so that it's clear that we're using a tablet device and not a computer that's packed into a tablet.
However, again, let me clarify. I don't believe the USB-C. I have serious doubts on it. Just, again, it keeps coming up. And I try to figure out why people keep coming up, and the only reason I can see people coming up with it is the justification for business use.
And that may be a very good use. Sorry, Father.
That was going to be my however is I do know that a number of people that I know that work in business, they would love a USB port of some sort in an iPad. And also, I mean, honestly, it would be really nice to have the exact same charging cable for everything. That actually just sounds kind of nice to me, just as a feature. I don't know. There's no other reason.
That would be cool.
Even if,
yeah, but the USB-C is no one else has it right now other than the MacBook.
Well, currently, right? So,
right.
Is that the new standard? And that's a big question mark. Right. My understanding is I don't know. No one seems to know how dedicated Apple is to USB-C.
It was an interesting choice for the MacBook, no question.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, that might be, that's an interesting way to look at it. The iPad and the MacBook as the iPad Pro, an iPad Pro with a USB-C as a companion to the MacBook. There would seem to be some redundancy there, but there also might be some usefulness that maybe we're all missing. Or maybe the maybe the iPad Pro could become the second monitor for the MacBook, and never mind. Now I'm just going crazy.
See, now that would be a great idea, though. I use Duet, so I will actually turn my iPad into a second screen for my MacBook Pro on occasion, and it's a great app to do that with. A larger screened iPad would actually be very interesting. Not simply as a second screen, but a larger second screen, something that's more comparable to the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and then you could detach it and use it standalone. That's actually a very interesting idea.
Or if you're doing a presentation to a customer, turn the iPad Pro around, let them see that, and you're running it with the MacBook.
Oh, yeah. Back when I was in business as a salesman, I would have loved that.
Yeah. I don't know if we answered any questions, guys. We certainly ask a lot of them, and it's interesting. And hopefully we've given some folks a few things to think about as maybe they're looking to upgrade their iPads with whatever comes out, whenever it comes out. Yeah, a lot of questions. Father, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you. I'm so glad we were able to get you back on, especially now that you've got a new station, and I hope to see you a little more often.
No, it's great. I have my own room now, and it's a little bit quieter than where I was previously. So this is nice. I don't have the BART running behind me anymore.
Jeff, it's always a pleasure. I'm sorry it's taken us this long to get you back, but you're just a busy guy.
Yeah, what's up with that? But it's awesome to be here. I always love being on shows with you, Chuck.
Good. Well, we'll get you back soon.
Awesome.
And Rob, you're running a podcasting empire, so I know it's tough to get you as well as your own show. But thank you for taking the time to join us.
Oh, Chuck, thank you for having me on. It's fun, and it'll be fun to see what happens in September. This is my Christmas in September for my show.
Good.
Oh, agreed. Fun.
Maybe we'll reconvene this group and we'll see how we did, and then see what the analysis is of what we actually get. So
that sounds awesome.
Sounds like a good idea.
Great. Folks, we're glad you joined us too. We hope we've given you a little something to think about. And also, I want to thank you for sticking it out with us as well as our guests. We've had some Skype issues. You can probably see them with the audio not quite synced to the video. It was just one of those days, but we had a great discussion, so we're glad you joined us. Please check out everything MacVoice is doing at MacVoices.com. I'm Chuck Joyner. We'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting MacVoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at BackbeatMedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at CashFly.com.